choirs have played an important part in Jewish life since biblical times. In the temple, the Levites formed the choir, which consisted of a minimum of 12 adult men, as well as providing the orchestra. They began their training at the age of 25 and then joined the choir at 30. After the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, when there was no longer a choir, the rabbis decreed that as a sign of national mourning, both vocal and instrumental music be banned. In later years, Maimonides permitted a choir to sing at synagogue services. Instrumental music has continued to be forbidden on religious occasions other than at weddings. Outside of the synagogue, Jews set up choirs and choral societies wherever they lived, and concert performances of liturgical music have gone on for many years. Some choirs that became renowned were the Hazomir Choral Society, that was organized by Joseph Rumshinsky in Lodz, Poland, in 1899, and the Hadassah Choral Union in New York in 1916. The love that Jews have always had for music is so ingrained in us that choirs were also established in the camps during the Holocaust. In 1952, the Zimriah was set up in Israel. This is a choirs festival held every 3 years, and in which choirs from all around the world come to participate. In this country, there have also been many choirs and choral societies. In 1920, Samuel Allman set up the Halevi Choral Society. The London Jewish Male Voice Choir was established in 1926, and there was a London Chazonim Choir, started in 1934, and was conducted by my teacher, the Reverend Leo Brill. You may recall others, such as the Brady Ramblers, the Kinnon Choir, the Eilith Choral Society, amongst many others. This evening, we're going to celebrate 5 London choirs who, until COVID, still gathered regularly to rehearse, even when there may have been no performance in the offing. Some have started to regroup, and we hope that we shall soon be able to enjoy their live performances once again. Each choir will be introduced by a representative who will outline the history and achievements of their respective choir. We shall then play a performance piece that they have selected. The order of their appearance is purely alphabetical, as you shall see. So we're starting with the London Cantorial Singers. I have had the great pleasure of singing with this choir, and am honoured to be one of its current patrons. One of my fondest memories is of them singing with Cantor Helfgott on his first appearance in this country at the Hendon Synagogue, when they were on absolutely top form. One of the things I must admit irritates me is how so many choir leaders think that the composer's original composition can be improved on by a new arrangement. I've seen a piece of music which is headed composed by, let's say, Lewandowski, and then followed by arranged by so-and-so / so-and-so and then so-and-so, each one presumably thinking that he's improved on the first composer's original intentions, and then on each of his predecessors. One of the things that I so admire in the London Cantorials is that they aim to do exactly the opposite, as we shall now hear from David Prager.
Good evening, and welcome to the London Cantorial Singers. My name is David Prager, and I have been a member of the London Cantorial Singers for over 10 years. The choir was founded in 1995 by the late Ian Lyons with the purpose of trying to preserve traditional synagogue music, which was beginning to disappear into obscurity from synagogue services. The aim of the choir is to perform synagogue music, once popular but now rarely heard, as far as possible in the composer's original setting. The late Reverend Reuben Turner became patron of the choir in 2002, and our current patrons are Henry Grunwald and Rabbi Jeffrey Schisler. Our soloists include cantors David Shine, Henry Black, and David Rome. The choir was originally conducted by David Hilton, and subsequently by Michael Simon. David Druce was invited to join the London Cantorial Singers in 1995 and took over the baton at the end of 1997. He was chairman and musical director until 2019, and under his leadership, membership grew to over 25 choristers. The choir has performed both nationally and abroad. Alan Friedman was appointed musical director in 2019, with David remaining as chairman of the choir. Since 2001, the highlight of every year for us has been our choral slichot service. Unfortunately, last year, owing to the pandemic, we were unable to sing a slichot service, so we created a virtual slichot service. However, this year we were able to return to live singing, and we were honored to join the Western Marble Arch community at Midnight Slichot, conducted by Chazan Yossi Muller. This was our first live performance in over 18 months. The Cantorials have sung with many international cantors, including Chaim Adler, Benjamin Müller, Yossi and Rafi Müller, Yitzhak Meir Helfgott, Shmuel Barzilai, David Weinbach, Yankee Lemmer, Beryl Zucker, Morty Boyer, Albert and Benjamin Chait, and the late Moshe Schulhoff. We have also been associated with several UK-based guest chazonim, including Avrami Freilich, Dov Spear, Gedalia Alexander, Jonathan Mergraf, Jeffrey Schisler, and Steve Robbins. For more information about the choir, please visit our website www.tlcs.org.uk or the choir's Facebook page or our YouTube channel. You're now going to hear from 2003 from a Ma'ariv service in Hendon United Synagogue, David Kusevitsky's Hama'avir Bonov with soloist Cantor Yitzhak Meir Helfgott.
The next choir is the London Jewish Male Choir, the oldest established Jewish choir in London still in existence. I'm sure that many of us will have wonderful memories of listening to this choir over the years, of which, as it happens, my great uncle Sam Tannenbaum was a member at its beginning. While there are fortunately some recordings of the choir from its early days, for example, you can hear Martin White conduct the choir with the incomparable Chazan Pinchas Feigenblum singing solo, there are, as you'd expect, many more recordings from recent times. Many of us will be at concerts of the London Jewish Male Choir. Who can forget Alan Bilgora and the choir singing Kalinka at the Royal Festival Hall, while everybody was looking at their watch while he was holding a top note that just went on and on and on. Those who could remember when it was conducted by Martin White used to argue over whether it was better in those days or when Emmanuel Fisher conducted. I only remember from Manny's time, and I can't think how anything could have been better. Manny may have been a minimalist conductor. Sometimes you could barely see him move his arms, but certainly he produced a maximalist performance from his singers. Here to tell us about its history is Brian Bradley.
The world's longest established Jewish choir was established in 1926. I was about to say the world's oldest Jewish choir, but that could have been understood as referring to some of our members, which is quite a different issue. I don't think we have any of the founding members still with us, but some of us have been associated with the choir for a very long time. In my case, I joined in 1986, and I'm not quite the longest-serving member. But back to 1926, when the highly respected musician in the Jewish community, Isidore Berman, brought together some 18 choristers and chazanim from synagogue choirs to form what came to be called the London Jewish Male Voice Choir. A copy of the program from their first concert is on screen now. Incidentally, we had the privilege of performing before Isidore Berman's great-grandson, Nick de Jong, a year or 3 back. I hope he is listening in now. Since then, we may have lost a voice from our title, but we still raise our voices together regularly and perform whenever and wherever we can. The main object of the choir, as described in our constitution, is to promote and advance musical education by practice and performance of choral works, including in particular, but not limited to, Jewish, sacred, secular, spiritual, and folk music. That is a broad ambition, but it reflects the width of repertoire which has been a feature of the choir throughout, from Renaissance to newly commissioned work and in a range of languages, even including Japanese at one time. Our founding director, Isidore Berman, continued to lead the choir until the outbreak of war in 1939, assisted by Martin White, who took over the baton in 1945. Martin White reassembled the choir from a nucleus of 5 of the original members, started holding weekly rehearsals, and by 1948 the choir had a membership of some 45 singers, including a number of chazanim. Between them, these two conductors laid the foundation for what became the world's leading Jewish male choir, establishing a unique style of performance which still influences the way Jewish liturgical choral music is performed today. This is what the choir sounded like in 1928, performing a traditional Yiddish song as Moshiach wird schon kommen, which describes all the wonderful things that will happen when the Messiah comes. Martin White emigrated to Israel in 1957 and was succeeded by his understudy Emanuel Manny Fisher, who, with his father and three brothers, had been at the heart of the choir. Indeed, Manny Fisher's father was one of the founder members who restarted the choir in 1945. Manny took the choir to new heights of performance and acclaim, singing with the leading chazanim of the day, including David Kosovitsky, Moshe Korn, Simon Hass, Moshe Stern, and Joseph Malavani. He conducted the choir in recordings, radio performances, and on 2 television shows. Incidentally, Manny also wrote music for several films, including A Hard Day's Night, Solomon and Sheba, and Yentl. He also took the choir on several trips, including to then West Berlin in 1969 for a series of concerts and television programs organized by the West German government to celebrate the rehabilitation of the German Jewish community. One of the most poignant moments in that tour was crossing Checkpoint Charlie to visit the grave of Louis Lewandowski in East Berlin and to sing a tribute to him at his gravestone. The choir has latterly visited Berlin to contribute to the annual Lewandowski Festival, and we then took the opportunity to revisit his gravestone and repeat the tribute. A point of information, Louis Lewandowski was one of the foremost composers of Jewish liturgical music in the 19th century, and his compositions and arrangements are a significant part of today's Jewish liturgical repertoire. Here is a recording made for German television of the choir under Manny Fisher in 1970, singing Shomer Yisrael. Manny Fisher retired in 1976 after nearly 20 years in charge. He was briefly replaced by Lionel Lee in a caretaker role before the choir appointed a young research scientist, Dr. Julian Schindler. Julian had been conducting the Edgware United Synagogue Choir when he was 17 years old, as well as some other ensembles, so he came with a good pedigree. Under Julian, the choir built on its repertoire with his own arrangements of liturgical and secular music, performing with leading chazanim at many of London's premier venues. This period of activity culminated in an overseas concert tour to Israel in 1988. Julian received semicha in 1987, and his rabbinical commitments subsequently were such that he could no longer commit to the choir's weekly rehearsals. He was succeeded by a professional musician, Ron Rappaport, then by Rabbi Shmuel Neumann of Hendon, and in 1992 by Clive Hyman, who some of you may also remember, as he conducted the Edgware United Synagogue Choir for the high holidays for several years. Clive developed and expanded the repertoire and started to professionalize the choir's organization by computerizing the scores so that we no longer had to rely on variably legible handwritten music. Nowadays it's all on Google Drive. We travelled with Clive to South Africa in 2000 and to Poland and Israel. When Clive left the choir in 2004, after the caretaker directorship of Hilton Scher, who some of you may remember from his time in Edgware, we appointed another professional musician to the director position, Michael Etherton. Michael introduced new musical standards to the choir and led us in a range of concerts and tours, including 2 visits to Gibraltar and 1 to Florida. He also introduced an element of newly commissioned work in a more challenging mode, and the role of associate composer-stroke-arranger, which was very ably fulfilled by another up-and-coming young musician, Joseph Finlay. When Michael moved on in 2013, Joe Finlay was appointed musical director. Today, Joe has written or arranged much of the choir's repertoire, and while we recognize that traditional cantorial music may not have the popularity it once had, we still have our roots firmly in the established liturgical repertoire. Over the years, the choir has had some great moments and some wonderful experiences, as well as some interesting moments involving misplaced passports and suitcases on our travels. As well as the tours already mentioned, we have travelled to France, Holland, Ireland, Norway, and even North Wales for an international Eisteddfod. And we have performed on some of the greatest stages, including the South Bank and the Royal Albert Hall, as well as Jerusalem's Binyanei Ha'umah. Today we are a smaller choir than we used to be, but we continue to uphold the great tradition of Jewish choral music performed by male voices. Our next scheduled performance will be in Chelsea Synagogue on the first night of Hanukkah. I have to thank Joe Finlay for his continued inspiration to the choir, not to mention his patience, and to Dan Jacobs, the past chairman, whose program notes I have plagiarized for this presentation. To close, here is a performance of a medley of the choir's favourite pieces compiled for us by Stephen Glass and conducted by Michael Etherton.
Als der Retter Ellie Melech ist geworden, sehr Friedrich ist geworden, sehr Friedrich, wenn ich Melech. Wo der Rocken nach der Tolle, mit dem Schammes wird nach Tolle, du geschehen, was die viele zu sein. Und als die viele Tiger wieder oben sind, oben viele Tiger wieder oben sind. Und als die viele Tiger wieder oben, viele Tiger wieder oben, viele Tiger wieder oben sind. Lunge machen ein eigen Lied. Eins, zwei, drei, eins, zwei, drei, eins, zwei, eins, zwei, eins, zwei, drei. Wegen, an jeder Schmied. In sein Schmied, in sein Schmied, in sein Schmiederei. In sein Schmiederei. In sein Schmiederei. Nimm alle wir weckt uns tanzen, David am Melech weckt uns spielen, Moshe Rabbeinu weckt uns Freude, ja, wir haben schon mal weggetrieben, schon mal über Jesus vergessen. Yitamu, Yitamu, Hatayim bin Haaretz. Yitamu, Yitamu, Hatayim bin Haaretz. Hatayim bin Haaretz, Yeshayim Avinu. Orina Shiyetz Hashem, Hallelujah. Yitamu, Yitamu, Hatayim bin Haaretz. Yitamu, Yitamu, Hatayim bin Haaretz. Hatayim bin Haaretz, Yeshayim Avinu. Orina Shiyetz Hashem.
We now come to Nema Singers. The Nema Singers have certainly made their mark in recent years. They've performed around the country and in many countries abroad in shuls and on the concert platforms to great acclaim. They've sung with all the top chazanim in the world today, as Mark Temeles, one of their founders and their conductor, will tell us. When Mark's finished, we shall listen to a recording of the Nema Singers with Chazan Moshe Hashel performing the Keil Ma'ilachamim, the memorial prayer from the Holocaust Memorial Day commemoration in 2001. Mark believes that this could be their finest recording. When you've heard it, you may well agree with him. Here's Mark.
Good evening, and thank you to Rabbi Shisler for inviting the Nema Singers to participate in this magnificent evening, and for giving me the opportunity to talk about the history of our choir, the Nema Singers. My name is Mark Temeles, and I'm proud to be the conductor or the co-leader of the Nema Singers, together with my good friend Jonathan Weisbart. I'd like to start by going back to a Tuesday evening back in early 1994, when Chazan Moshe Hashel called Jonathan and myself and asked us if it might be possible to assemble for him a choir for a bar mitzvah that was taking place at Finchley United Synagogue, Kinloss, that coming Shabbat. We lived in the community at the time, and Moshe called us. Despite the short notice, the two of us managed somehow to gather a few chorister friends, some of whom, including myself, were at the time also singing in the Shabbaton Choir. And we brought together a small but talented group of 5 singers. The Shabbat was, thank God, a great success. The Baal Simcha was very happy, and we were invited back. and this led to the formation of a wonderful ongoing group of singers, initially called the New Finchley Choir, rather unimaginatively, and then subsequently, and I'll explain why shortly, where we renamed ourselves the Nema Singers. At that time, of course, few could have imagined that more than 25 years later, the Nema Singers would be firmly established as one of the finest Jewish male voice choirs in the world. And shortly before COVID-19 kicked in, we had the privilege of performing at our own Silver Jubilee concert in JW3 in early 2020. So what's the choir all about? Why do we have this choir? So from the start, we made it a mission to preserve Jewish music heritage, to beautify synagogue services, and to enhance the congregation's experience of tefillah, of experience of prayer, through music. Hence the name Ne'ima, coming from a Jewish reference to beautiful, it's a reference in our tefillot to beautiful melodies associated with angels. We say in Shacharit, we say every day, B'safa v'rura u'v'ne'ima, which means a clear and pleasant or sweet articulation that the angels would be interacting and praising Hashem. We felt that there was, and we think there still is, a need to fly the flag for keeping the classical repertoire current, relevant, and meaningful, while introducing modern music that reflect the changing tastes and community needs, all of which showcase the breadth of the capabilities of the group as well. Throughout the group, our driving ethos is to look to sing high-quality music sung to a high level of musical performance as a means to connect with the congregation, and using the musical experience to create an atmosphere conducive to prayer and devotion to Hashem. Where did we source our inspiration from? Well, I think it's fair to say that the Chazan Moshe Heschel and the Nema Singers became, during the late 1990s and throughout the 2000s and past, pretty much synonymous with each other. When I think about the vision, the driving force that created the choir, the enterprise, the inspiration and the closeness of thinking, this is very much Moshe Heschel together with ourselves. And I remember the hours we spent together planning, exploring ideas, creating the music, the vision, the goals, etc. What we wanted to achieve together for our community and the broader sort of Jewish community in the UK and really worldwide. And to this day, we retain a very strong connection to Chazan Chazan Heschel, having made. They obviously made their home in St John's Wood Synagogue, having moved from Kinloss in 1997. And since his retirement in 2015, the choir continues to accompany cantor Avrami Kirschenbaum at St John's Wood Synagogue. And the choir is also invited regularly to make guest appearances at several other UK shuls. And of course, the annual Slichot service in St John's Wood is a focal point for the UK diary. I think it's also important for me to recognise the role that my father-in-law, Chazan Naftali Hershtik, has played throughout our existence. He has also been and continues to be a huge inspiration, mentor and a guide to us as a group. Over the years, the choir has been privileged to accompany many of the world's leading chazanim. I'm not going to start listing them out, as I'm very likely to forget somebody and probably to upset them. But we've been fortunate to perform across the UK and at several prestigious international venues, including New York, Paris, Amsterdam, Krakow. And particular highlights were performing at the inaugural Holocaust Memorial Day ceremony in 2001, and that was live on BBC One in the presence of His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, then Chief Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, and other distinguished guests. And we also appeared that year on BBC Songs of Praise later that year. What music do we sing? our rich and varied repertoire spans the full spectrum of Jewish music, arranged to great effect by a number of different arrangers. Mainly, I would say, the majority of our music has been arranged by Raymond Goldstein, but we also sing music by a number of other eminent and renowned arrangers, including Stephen Glass and others. Even I've had a go at arranging some of our repertoire as well. And that's really spans the cantorial heritage through to classical music, through to popular synagogue settings and Hasidic melodies, Israeli songs, and this covers both shul repertoire and concert repertoire as well. And I guess if we think about who the singers are, who is in the choir, well, I guess, you know, over 25 years, as you can imagine, there's been a lot of changes. A lot of different choristers have sung with the choir over that time. And while the composition of the choir has changed, in fact, only 3 of the original members from 25 years ago actually remain. We have approximately 20 people in the group now. And a number of the alumni of the group, include present-day UK Chazanim conductors and singers, Elliot Alderman, Adrian Alexander, Jason Silver, Stephen Leese, Shimon Kramer, and of course Rabbi Daniel Epstein. We even produced Rabbanim, you see, to name just a few. And we remain a champion of high-quality synagogue music out of a deep-rooted belief that this is the key to rejuvenating and inspiring rejuvenating prayer services, rejuvenating tefillot, and inspiring congregations in their prayer as well. So once again, I would like to thank you, Rabbi Shisler, for inviting us to participate in this event, a real celebration of the rich heritage of the UK Jewish choral music tradition, and we're proud, really proud to be able to play a part in its continuity. Thank you very much.
We shall shortly hear the history of our next choir, the Shabbaton Choir. As Russell Kett will tell us, it grew out of the B'nai B'rith Festival Singers, with whom I, my good friend, cousin Steve Robbins, sang their first Slichot service in 1988 in the New West End Synagogue. I well remember the enormous amount of work that went into that service and the commitment of the choir, which is clearly something they still retain today, as their numerous legendary Slichot services and appearances testify to. Amongst their television appearances is one on Call the Midwife, although I'm relieved to say it wasn't in a medical capacity. This much-travelled choir has appeared in various countries around the world, bringing song and happiness to many. Here is Russell Kett.
Hi, I'm Russell Kett, the chairman of the Shabbaton Choir, and it's my pleasure today to tell you a little bit about the choir, its history, and so forth. So way back on the 3rd of September 1988, under the direction of Stephen Glass, the B'nai B'rith Festival Singers, together with Chazanim Steve Robbins and Jeffrey Shizler, conducted a slichot service at the new West End Synagogue, St. Petersburg Place. It was the first time in almost 20 years that a choral slichot service featuring 2 chazanim had been held in the West End of London. The music, whilst traditional, had been completely rearranged by Stephen Glass and was heard that evening by a packed congregation. In 1991, after Stephen Glass became musical director of Sha'ar HaShamayim Synagogue in Montreal, the then newly formed Shabbaton Choir, successor to the B'nai B'rith Festival Singers, was asked to take part in the service of induction of Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. On the previous evening, the choir had conducted its first choral slichot service under our new musical director, Stephen Levy, with Chazanim Steve Robbins and Lionel Rosenfeld, again singing to a full congregation. Ever since, the Shabbaton Choir, with Stephen Levy and Rabbi Lionel Rosenfeld as its mainstays, has led an annual choral slichot service in services and synagogues around London and Great Britain. Shabbaton Choir's innovative choral sound has been heard in shul services and concerts around the United Kingdom and abroad. The harmonies and arrangements are written with the aim of bringing out clearly the mood and meaning of the music. Since 2003, the choir, with Chazanim Rabbi Lionel and Johnny Turgle, together with Shimon Kramer, have sung their way through 11 emotional missions to Israel entitled Solidarity Through Song, initially led by Rabbi Lord Sachs, and visiting and reaching out in music to those wounded by terrorist bombings, those in hospitals, schools and orphanages, care homes for the elderly, centers for the mentally and physically disabled, and medical daycare centers. Emotional and unforgettable experiences for all involved. The choir's Solidarity Through Song mission in February 2020 was indeed our last opportunity to sing together before the COVID pandemic caused everything in our schedule to be cancelled. So let me share a few examples of what we've done in recent years. Way back in 2005, the choir and Chazanim were invited to the town of Nieheim, Germany, to commemorate Kristallnacht in a full day of prayer and song around the town. And we sang at the Jewish burial ground, the restored synagogue, which is now a museum, and held an evening concert for an audience of several hundred, another unforgettable experience. In 2007, the choir and Rabbi Lionel visited Poland with the Yad Vashem UK Foundation, leading memorial prayers at Auschwitz-Birkenau and an evening service in the ancient Ramah Synagogue in Krakow. In 2009, the choir and Chazanim were invited to New York as the guests of the Hampton Synagogue and Young Israel of Scarsdale. November 11, the choir and Chazanim were invited by the Gothenburg Jewish community in Sweden to give a Shabbaton and a concert. In 2014, following on from an earlier visit in 2012, the choir, together with Chazanim, Lionel, Shimon, and Johnny, were invited with Rabbi Lord Sachs to return to Los Angeles in support of the Hakem Hillel Hebrew Academy, where the choir and Chazanim conducted choral Shabbaton services and concerts to packed congregations at shuls throughout Beverly Hills and at the gala fundraising dinner in Los Angeles. In 2015, The choir, together with Chazanim Lionel and Johnny, took part in emotional ceremonies at the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp to mark the 70th anniversary of the liberation of the camp by the British Army in April 1945. As well as singing at the camp, we took part in a service of remembrance at a cemetery at the nearby British garrison, and we also sang for the Jewish community in Hanover. In 2018, we returned to Hanover for a gala concert on Holocaust Memorial Day. We'd been invited to return in 2020 for the commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Bergen-Belsen, but of course this had to be cancelled. In January 2016, the choir celebrated its 25th anniversary with 2 concerts at the Arts Depot in North London. We were joined by Chazanim Lionel and Johnny, together with Steve Robbins and Avrami Freilich, Rabbi Danny Bergson, and the choir of the Emmanuel College Preparatory School. In the same year, the choir was invited to sing at the prestigious Templeton Awards ceremony held in London, when Rabbi Lord Sachs was presented with the illustrious Templeton Prize. We've recorded many times for radio and television, and were frequently featured at as the musical accompaniment to Rabbi Lord Sachs when he presented the BBC Rosh Hashanah broadcasts. We've released 6 albums with Chazanim Rosenfeld, Robbins, Kramer, and Turpin. Our 7th and most recent recording is the commemorative 25th anniversary album entitled Anim Zmirot, comprising 13 original compositions by our then musical director, Stephen Levy. Most recently, we recorded a video presentation of Leonard Cohen's You Want It Darker for a special tribute dinner hosted by the Genesis Prize Foundation to mark the first yahrzeit of Rabbi Lord Sachs, the dinner being held later this month. Leonard Cohen was a particular favorite of Lord Sachs. Last year, we were unable to lead a midnight Salichot service due to COVID, but in its place, we were able to show the premiere of a professional film of the 2019 service, which featured the pre-Salichot address of Rabbi Lord Sachs. The world is mourning his passing, and the choir feels his loss immensely. He was an inspiration to us over the 30 years since we began singing, and we will be eternally grateful for his encouragement and support. This year, we were pleased to hold our midnight Slichot service live in Bushey, the first under the baton of Benjamin Fingerhut, who took over as musical director from Stephen Levy in spring 2020, just as COVID-19 struck. Stephen Levy has been appointed the choir's first ever conductor laureate, following nearly 30 years as our musical director, during which time he and the choir achieved so much. He's composed some of our most famous pieces, including the now world-famous Oseh Shalom, which we're playing today, recorded several memorable CDs, and led us around the world to perform in impressive concert venues and presenting choral Shabbat services from Israel to Los Angeles, from Stockholm to the Hamptons, and throughout the UK. Stephen's impact on the Shabbaton Choir has been immense, and we're truly grateful for his long years of devoted service. It's our hope that our music will continue to make traditional services more meaningful for the synagogue worshipper and reawaken interest in and understanding of our liturgical tradition. As Benjamin Fingerhut leads us into our next 30 years, with a largely younger group of choristers assisting him to evolve a musical style combining our traditional music with a more modern outlook, we look forward to seeing the Shabbaton Choir grow from strength to strength.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו, ואמרו אמן. הוא עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו, ואמרו אמן. שלום, שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו, ואמרו אמן.
Our final choir this evening is the Zemmel Choir, which describes itself as the UK's leading mixed-voice Jewish choir. It was established in 1955, and since then it's performed all over the world. It has a very wide repertoire and performs contemporary music as well as many of the classics. Whenever I give a talk about Jewish music, particularly to non-Jewish audiences, I play the Zemmel Choir's performance of Louis Lewandowski's Hallelujah, Psalm 150. It's a fantastic composition, and I think it can only be authentically performed by a mixed voice choir. And every time I listen to the Zemmel Choir sing it, I can imagine Lewandowski standing and applauding like mad. Here's Ben Wolf, their current musical director, to tell us about them.
Hello, I'm Benjamin Wolfe. I'm musical director of the Zemmel Choir, and I'm now going to use some of the strange skills I had to learn during a year of online teaching to talk to you a little bit about the choir, its history, and what we do. So the choir was founded in 1955 by Dudley Cohen, who celebrates his 90th birthday this year, and we are hoping to have a 90th birthday concert for him in the very near future. On my right, according to your screen, you can see a picture of the choir broadcasting in 1961. And over the years, the choir has had many musical directors. I joined the choir as musical director in 2003, and I never expected still to be conducting the choir in 2021. But it's been a very interesting journey through Jewish music, and I'd like to share a little bit of it with you today. A few more pictures just to give you some history and also a sense of the changes in Zemmel's uniform over the years, which has been a source of a lot of discussion. Here they are in the 1970s with Anthony Saunders. Here they are in the 1980s with Malcolm Singer, and with Maureen Crease, who was assistant musical director for a very large part of my tenure as musical director at Westminster Abbey, and then with my predecessor, Viv Bellos, with apologies to Robert Max and Jeffrey Simon for not including them on the grounds of not having really enough time to do so. During that period, the choir has forged a reputation as the UK's leading mixed voice Jewish choir, originally performing in Orthodox synagogues, but more recently performing more commonly either in Reform progressive synagogues or outside the Jewish world entirely, including, most excitingly for most of the choir, tours and things that we've done abroad. So here they are with me. At the top you can see the first formal picture that was taken at Hendon Reform Synagogue, and then below a picture that was taken during our tour of the USA and Canada, with me being a little bit stronger than I might be now, lying down in front of the choir for that group photo. So those are important occasions that I remember and a period of time that I remember. Some of those people are still singing with the choir. Some of them sadly are no longer with us. Some of them have either left the choir or have passed away. So who are we? We are in many ways a family. Zemmel prides itself on being a family choir, a choir of people who have known each other for a very long time in some cases, or people who have joined recently and have been welcomed into the Zemmel family. It's a friendly group of people who get on well with each other, who enjoy spending time with each other, and who enjoy singing together. Unlike many Jewish choirs in the modern world, it's a mixed voice choir as opposed to a male voice choir, and it's an auditioned choir. So you do have to pass a not overly taxing, I hope, audition in order to join the choir. And we sing quite a wide variety of music. We are still based in Northwest London, which is where the choir has been based since the beginning in 1955. And the repertoire that we sing is fairly broad. So the remit is to sing music that is essentially of Jewish interest, and that could be liturgical music, which includes composers such as Lewandowski, or more recent composers, Salomone Rossi, going right back to the beginnings of Jewish choral music. It can be compositions by Israeli composers such as Paul Ben Chaim, as well as quite a large number of arrangements of Ladino songs, Yiddish songs, as well as music by Jewish composers written not necessarily even for Jewish purposes, and then also music that has some Jewish connection. And that can be as tenuous as performing Beatles songs because of Brian Epstein, or in some cases, performing music by non-Jewish composers that are settings of originally Hebrew texts. So that's taken us even to people such as Monteverdi or Palestrina when they are composing songs or pieces of music that are also composed in Hebrew texts by Jewish composers. And there's a large body of repertoire. So I have repertoire folders taking up a very large shelf with music that stretches back to 1955. And perhaps one of the most important things is the music that has been composed by Zemmel's conductors. So when we do Dudley's 90th birthday concert, we will be performing his music, and many other conductors have made arrangements for the choir, many of them by Malcolm Singer, and more recently I've composed a number of pieces for the choir, one of which, a large-scale oratorio, was recorded by the choir just before the coronavirus pandemic hit. So the final thing, just to draw your attention to, things that I'm particularly proud of during my tenure with the choir. And I think I would highlight recordings. Obviously, it's nice to put some of our repertoire down for the future. And it's interesting to note also that some of this repertoire has been the staple repertoire of the choir really since 1955. And the recordings include pieces by Lewandowski, they include things such as Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, so things that are really core repertoire to the choir, and also some things that are less well known. During my time, I think I've also been most proud of the interfaith activities that we've undertaken, and that includes performing for the Sacrée Journée de Strasbourg. So one of the pictures you're about to see is of us performing in the Great Mosque in Strasbourg, which was a wonderfully evocative thing for us to do. And I would also highlight our participation in choral festivals. Now that includes the Lewandowski Festival in Berlin, one of my favorite festivals of music really within the Jewish world, and also the festivals organized as part of the European Association of Jewish Choirs, which we created back in 2012 during the Olympics year. And that's a sort of, well, was an annual festival and will be returning hopefully once the strange chaos of the coronavirus pandemic dies down. And that is an opportunity for us to sing alongside people who are now our friends across Europe with choirs from places such as Paris, Vienna, and Rome. I'm also very proud of the services that I helped to organize and that we performed at Westminster Abbey to commemorate the anniversaries of both the liberation of Auschwitz and of Kristallnacht. And so that picture you can see to my right is Westminster Abbey. Above it is the festival in 2012. Here we have Zemmel performing in the mosque in Strasbourg, and below Zemmel performing at the choral festival in Italy. So thank you for listening. That's a very brief tour of the Zemmel Choir, and I hope you enjoy listening to us sing in just a moment.
I do hope you've enjoyed our presentation this evening. As you've seen, we're blessed in this country with some wonderful choirs who have given pleasure to so many people over so many years, and no doubt will continue to do so well into the future. One of the issues that faces them all is that of gaining new participants. If you'd like to join any of the choirs and know anyone who might, please contact them. They're all online. I'm sure they'd be delighted to hear from you. David Drews, the director of the London Cantorials, was saying to me today that their choristers are more than just a group of people who sing together. They're like a family, as Ben Wolfe also said in his presentation. And I'm quite sure it's the same with all the choirs. Singing together really does bring you together. If you want to secure your happy place in eternity, remember that in the Talmud, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, whoever sings in this world will also sing in the next. Before I conclude, I want once again to thank Tony Honigberg for all his hard work in putting this program together. I couldn't have done it without you, Tony. Hope you've enjoyed this evening and hope you'll look out for more programs from the Edgware Synagogue. Good night.
We have 2 further sessions in the Edgware United Synagogue program this month. Next Tuesday, the 9th of November, we have our annual Armistice Day lecture when Dr. Ronnie Fraser's topic will be The Thrill of New Technology, 1914 to 1919, Jewish Flyers in World War I. And on Tuesday, the 23rd of November, we have a session on Lithuanian Holocaust denial by the 2 leading experts on this topic, live streamed from Los Angeles and Chicago. Our next cantorial session will be on Tuesday, the 7th of December, when our own cousin, Cantor Yossi Schwartz, will tell us about how a professional cantor is trained in a session entitled The Making of a Professional Cousin. Details of these sessions are placed on our website, www.edgwareu.com, or alternatively, you can contact our office@edgwareu.com, and ask to be placed on the circulation list for the adult education program. Recorded past sessions are on our Edgware US YouTube channel, and this session will be uploaded immediately to YouTube. I'd like to thank the 5 musical representatives for introducing their outstanding choirs and playing their music. I think it demonstrates that whatever may be happening in UK synagogues, there will always be a market for high-quality choral music, and that concertization of this type of music will continue apace. I'd like to thank Jeffrey Schister for coordinating this session and Tony Honigberg for all his technical input. We're indebted to all the dedicated musical representatives and choristers for their contribution in keeping Jewish choral music alive and vibrant in London, and long may this continue. Thank you very much.